The early morning air was crisp as Rita pulled her garbage truck into the quiet streets of the wealthy neighborhood. At 4:30 a.m., the only sounds were her truck's rumbling engine and the occasional screech of tires against the damp asphalt. She'd been doing this route for 8 years now, and every building, every dumpster, every corner had become familiar to her like the back of her hand. That morning started just like any other. Rita adjusted her thick work gloves, stepped down from the truck's cabin, and began her routine. The fancy apartment buildings loomed above her, their windows mostly dark except for a few early risers. She couldn't help but wonder about the lives behind those expensive curtains while she went about her honest work. As she approached the third dumpster of her route, something felt different. The air seemed heavier somehow. Rita was just about to lift the dumpster's lid when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it over the truck's idling engine. A whimper, then a tiny cry. At first, she thought it might be a cat. This wouldn't be the first time she found abandoned pets in these rich neighborhoods. But this cry, it sounded different. Her heart started beating faster as she carefully opened the lid. There, nestled between bags of designer shopping waste and empty takeout containers, was a designer diaper bag. Rita might not own expensive things, but she'd seen enough ads to know this bag cost more than her week's salary. The cry came again, stronger this time. With trembling hands, she reached for the bag. Inside, wrapped in what felt like the softest blanket she'd ever touched, was a baby boy, tiny, red-faced, and very much alive. He couldn't have been more than a few days old. Rita felt her throat tighten as she noticed how expertly he was swaddled, wearing a clean onesie that probably cost more than her work boots. Oh my God, she whispered, quickly checking to make sure the baby was breathing properly. The little one opened his eyes, dark and alert, looking straight at her. Rita had raised 3 kids of her own, now all grown and in college thanks to her hard work, and she knew that look. This baby was healthy but hungry. Inside the bag, she found a pearl necklace that caught the streetlight's glow and a handwritten note on expensive paper. The handwriting was shaky but elegant. "Please give him a better life than I can." The paper smelled of expensive perfume, the kind Rita sometimes caught whiffs of when residents passed her on the street. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone to call 911, but before she did, she hugged the baby close to her chest, shielding him from the cold morning air. "You're safe now, little one," she whispered, her maternal instincts kicking in immediately. "You're safe." As she waited for the police to arrive, Rita couldn't stop thinking about what would drive someone to leave their baby, especially someone who could afford such expensive things. The diaper bag alone could probably pay her monthly rent. She noticed a tiny birthmark under the baby's right ear, shaped like a half moon, and found herself memorizing every detail of his perfect little face. The sound of approaching sirens broke the pre-dawn silence. Rita knew her quiet morning routine had just turned into something that would change not just her life, but the lives of many others. What she didn't know yet was that this tiny baby would bridge 2 very different worlds, and that her simple act of being in the right place at the right time would unfold into one of the most extraordinary stories the city had ever seen. As the police cars pulled up with their lights flashing, Rita held the baby a little tighter. Something in her heart told her that this wasn't going to be a simple case of finding the parents and moving on. The expensive items, the mysterious note, the way the baby was so well cared for before being abandoned, it all pointed to a deeper story, one that was just beginning to unfold. The first rays of sunlight were just starting to peek over the tall buildings, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rita looked down at the baby, now sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware that he was at the center of what would become an incredible story of love, sacrifice, and the unexpected connections that can form between people from entirely different worlds. The news spread through the city like wildfire. By noon, every local channel was running the story of the garbage collector who found a baby in a dumpster. Inspector Meera Kumar sat at her desk, studying the evidence laid out before her, the designer diaper bag, the cashmere blanket, and most intriguingly, the pearl necklace that seemed to hold the key to this mystery. "Look at this engraving," she said to her partner, pointing at the tiny markings on the necklace's clasp. Through her magnifying glass, she could make out the letters HF and a date from 30 years ago. After 20 years on the force, Mira had learned that small details often told the biggest stories. The breakthrough came when one of the junior officers recognized the jewelry's distinctive style. "Inspector, I think I've seen something like this before," he said, pulling up a society page on his computer. "The Hamilton family women wear these pearls in all their official photos. It's like their signature thing." The Hamiltons, of course. Mira had seen their name in the papers just last month. Rebecca Hamilton, wife of real estate mogul James Hamilton, had made headlines with the announcement of her pregnancy, followed by a tragic announcement of a miscarriage just weeks ago. Something wasn't adding up. Security footage from the neighborhood revealed more pieces of the puzzle. At 2:47 a.m., a black luxury car had stopped near the dumpster for exactly 3 minutes. The footage was grainy, but there was no mistaking the car's distinctive silhouette. It was a Rolls-Royce, and the Hamiltons owned one of only 5 in the city. Mira's investigation led her to the Hamiltons' Park Avenue penthouse. The doorman remembered something odd from that night. "Mrs. Hamilton went out around 2:30 a.m., he said, fidgeting with his uniform buttons. Said she needed some air. She seemed different, not her usual self." As Mira dug deeper, a more complex picture emerged. Rebecca Hamilton's social media, usually filled with perfect photos and charity event appearances, had gone quiet in recent months. Her last post was a heartfelt message about the stigma of maternal mental health, posted just days before the supposed miscarriage. The hospital records told another story entirely. There was no record of Rebecca Hamilton losing a baby. In fact, there was evidence she had given birth just days ago. The pieces were falling into place, but they revealed a picture far more complicated than a simple case of abandonment. Meanwhile, Rita, the garbage collector who found the baby, had become an unexpected local hero. News vans camped outside her modest apartment, hoping to get her story. But Rita was more concerned with the baby's welfare than her sudden fame. She visited him every day at the children's hospital, reading him stories and singing lullabies, while social services tried to figure out what to do next. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. A nurse at the city's most exclusive private hospital recognized Rebecca Hamilton from the security footage. "She was here," the nurse confided to Mira. "She had the baby, but something wasn't right. She kept talking about pressure and expectations. She seemed terrified, not just nervous like normal new moms." As Mira pieced together the timeline, she began to understand. Rebecca Hamilton had given birth in secret, overwhelmed by the pressure of her high society life and struggling with what would later be diagnosed as severe postpartum depression. The decision to leave the baby had been an act of desperation, not cruelty. The investigation took an even more interesting turn when Mira discovered a series of anonymous donations made to maternal mental health organizations from the Hamilton family account over the past few months. It seemed Rebecca had been secretly reaching out for help, trying to find support in a world that demanded perfection. The media was hungry for a villain, but Mira saw something different. A story about mental health, societal pressure, and the masks people wear to hide their struggles. As she prepared to confront the Hamiltons, she knew this case would challenge everyone's assumptions about privilege, motherhood, and what it means to be a good parent. Back at the hospital, the baby continued to thrive under the care of nurses and Rita's daily visits. He had no idea that his story was about to bring to light issues that society often preferred to keep hidden, or that his existence would soon bridge 2 very different worlds in ways nobody could have predicted. The morning Mira finally went to question Rebecca Hamilton. She carried with her not just her badge and notebook, but also a deeper understanding of how wealth and privilege sometimes created their own kind of prison. The true story was about to emerge, and it would shake the foundations of many lives in unexpected ways. The interview room at the police station felt smaller than usual that morning. Rebecca Hamilton sat there, her designer clothes and perfect manicure contrasting sharply with her tired eyes and trembling hands. Outside, reporters had gathered like vultures, waiting for the story that would shake the city's elite social circles to their core. "I never meant to hurt him," Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing." She pulled out a tissue from her expensive purse, but didn't dab at her eyes. Her tears fell freely now, smearing her carefully applied makeup. Inspector Mira listened as the truth finally emerged. Rebecca had grown up in a world where appearance meant everything. When she married James Hamilton, the pressure only intensified. Everyone expected a perfect pregnancy, a perfect birth, a perfect baby announcement in the society pages, she explained. But nothing felt perfect inside my head. The pregnancy had been difficult from the start. Not physically, the baby was healthy, but emotionally, Rebecca had been drowning. I couldn't sleep. I'd stand by the nursery window at 3 a.m., looking at all the designer baby things, and feel like I was suffocating. Her hands shook as she described the overwhelming anxiety that had consumed her. Social media had made everything worse. Every day, Rebecca scrolled through endless posts of smiling mothers and their babies. They all looked so happy, so sure of themselves, she said. But I felt like I was acting in a play and doing a terrible job at it. The night she gave birth, something snapped. The hospital staff had been sworn to secrecy. The Hamiltons' influence ensured that. But instead of joy, Rebecca felt an overwhelming panic. I kept thinking about how I couldn't do this, how I would ruin this perfect little person with my imperfections. That's when she had made her decision. She knew the garbage collection routes, knew that Rita, though she didn't know her name then, always started her shift at 4:30 a.m. I watched her sometimes from my window, Rebecca admitted. She always seemed so real, so genuine. I thought maybe. Her voice trailed off, but Inspector Mira understood. In her desperation, Rebecca had convinced herself that her baby would have a better life with someone more real than she felt she could be. The designer diaper bag, the expensive clothes, the pearl necklace, they were her way of making sure whoever found the baby would know this wasn't a case of poverty or neglect. Meanwhile, across town, Rita continued her daily visits to the baby at the hospital. She had no idea that her simple, honest way of living had somehow become a beacon of hope in Rebecca's troubled mind. The nurses had started calling her baby's angel, and the little one would calm down instantly at the sound of her voice. The investigation also revealed pages of unsent letters on Rebecca's laptop, desperate messages to mental health hotlines that she'd typed but never sent. What would people think? She explained, her voice bitter with self-recrimination. The Hamiltons don't ask for help. We give help. We donate to causes. We don't become causes. James Hamilton, when finally confronted with the truth, showed a side the public had never seen. His usual commanding presence crumbled as he learned what his wife had been going through. I didn't know, he kept saying, his face ashen. Why didn't I know? The truth hit the media like a tsunami, but not in the way anyone expected. Rebecca's struggle resonated with women across all social classes. Messages of support began pouring in, from other mothers who had battled postpartum depression, from women who understood the crushing weight of societal expectations. The most surprising support came from Rita herself. When she heard Rebecca's full story, she didn't react with anger or judgment. Instead, she asked to meet with Rebecca, not in an interrogation room, but in the hospital nursery where the baby was being kept. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we need help, Rita told Rebecca during their first meeting. The words were simple, but they cut through months of shame and pretense. Two women from completely different worlds found themselves sitting together, watching a baby who had unknowingly brought them into each other's lives. As the day's light faded outside the hospital windows, Inspector Mera watched the two women talking quietly by the baby's crib. She thought about strength, not the kind that shows up in society magazines or social media posts, but the real kind that admits to being human, to being imperfect. The story was far from over, but something had shifted. In exposing her deepest struggles, Rebecca Hamilton had accidentally started a conversation that needed to happen. And in the middle of it all, a baby boy slept peacefully, unaware that his story was changing how people thought about motherhood, mental health, and the masks we all wear. The courtroom buzzed with tension on a warm Monday morning. On one side sat the Hamiltons with their team of expensive lawyers, their suits probably costing more than Rita's monthly salary. On the other side sat Rita, wearing her best dress, the one she usually saved for her children's graduations. The baby, now 2 months old, was in temporary foster care. The Rita had been granted regular visits. "All rise," called the court officer, and Judge Patel entered the room. She was known for her fair judgments and no-nonsense approach. Looking at both parties, she could see this wasn't going to be a simple case. "Your Honor," began Mr. Lee, the Hamiltons' lead attorney, "my clients are the biological parents. Mrs. Hamilton was suffering from severe postpartum depression, a condition she's now receiving treatment for. They're ready and able to provide the child with every advantage in life." Rita's lawyer, a public defender named Mr. Patel, who'd taken a special interest in the case, stood up next. "Your Honor, my client has formed a significant bond with the child. She's visited him every single day since finding him. She raised 3 children who are now in college. She may not have wealth, but she has proven her dedication to this child's well-being." The media had turned the case into a circus. Outside the courthouse, people held signs supporting both sides. Some saw it as a class warfare issue, others as a mental health story. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Rebecca Hamilton took the stand first. She looked different from her society page photos, more real, less polished. "I made a terrible mistake," she testified, her voice steady despite her tears. "I was sick, but I'm getting help now. Every day, I think about my baby and the pain I caused him, but I want to make it right." The court listened as she described her ongoing therapy, the support groups she joined, and how she and James had restructured their lives to be more present parents. James had even stepped back from some of his business responsibilities to focus on his family. When it was Rita's turn to testify, she spoke from her heart. "I'm not here to judge Mrs. Hamilton," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I understand she was suffering. But that baby, he knows my voice now. He smiles when I sing to him. I may not be able to give him fancy things, but I can give him love, stability, and a normal life." The case dragged on for weeks. Expert witnesses testified about attachment theory and child development. The Hamiltons brought in specialists who talked about the importance of biological connections. Rita's side presented evidence of her parenting skills and the strong bond she'd formed with the baby. What complicated matters was how the public perceived the case. Every day, new opinions flooded social media. Some people called the Hamiltons entitled, while others criticized Rita for trying to steal someone else's child. The truth, as Judge Patel could see, lay somewhere in between. One particularly tense day in court, the baby started crying in his social worker's arms. Without thinking, both Rebecca and Rita stood up, their maternal instincts kicking in. The moment captured the heart of the dilemma, 2 women who genuinely cared for the same child. During a break in proceedings, something unexpected happened. Rita found Rebecca crying in the courthouse bathroom. Instead of walking away, she handed her a tissue. "You know," Rita said softly, "that little boy deserves all the love he can get. Maybe he doesn't have to choose." This conversation sparked an idea that would eventually change everything. In their next session, Rita's lawyer proposed something unprecedented: a shared custody arrangement. The suggestion initially shocked everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor," Mr. Patel explained, "we have an opportunity here to do something truly in the best interest of the child. He could benefit from both worlds, Mrs. Hamilton's resources and commitment to getting better, and my client's proven nurturing abilities and dedication." The Hamiltons' lawyers immediately objected, arguing that such an arrangement would be impractical and unprecedented. But Rebecca Hamilton surprised everyone by asking to speak. "I want to hear more about this idea," she said, looking at Rita with new respect. Judge Patel called both women to her chambers for a private conversation. She listened as they talked about their fears, their hopes, and most importantly, their shared love for the baby. What she saw wasn't a rich woman and a garbage collector fighting over a child. She saw 2 mothers trying to do what was best for a baby who had inadvertently brought them together. As the sun set on another day in court, the usual crowd of reporters waited outside for any news. But inside, something remarkable was taking shape, a solution that would challenge everyone's expectations and possibly create a new definition of what makes a family. The most touching moment came when the social worker brought in the baby for a court-supervised visit. He smiled at both women, reaching out his tiny hands to both of them. In that moment, it became clear that sometimes the best solution isn't choosing between 2 options, but finding a way to embrace both. The autumn leaves were falling outside the therapy center as Rebecca Hamilton waited for her turn. 6 months had passed since that first court hearing, and she barely resembled the polished socialite from the society pages anymore. Her designer clothes had been replaced by comfortable sweaters, her perfect manicure gone in favor of practical short nails. The real Rebecca was finally emerging. "Tell me about your week," her therapist, Dr. Won, asked during their session. Rebecca smiled. A genuine smile, not the practiced one she used to wear at charity events. "I had breakfast with Reba yesterday," she said. "We talked for hours. It's funny. If someone had told me a year ago that a garbage collector would become one of the most important people in my life, I wouldn't have believed them." The transformation wasn't just happening to Rebecca. Rita, too, was discovering new sides of herself. Standing up in court had awakened something in her, a confidence she didn't know she had. She'd started taking evening classes in child development, determined to understand more about early childhood care. One particularly meaningful day, Rebecca invited Rita to the Hamiltons' penthouse for tea. The staff watched in amazement as these two women from completely different worlds sat together, looking through baby photos and sharing stories. "You know what's strange?" Rita said, holding her teacup carefully. "I used to see these buildings and think the people inside must have perfect lives. Now I know everybody's just trying their best, same as me." The baby, whom they'd agreed to call Daniel, was thriving under the attention of both women. During supervised visits, he would bounce happily between them, somehow understanding that he had double the love most babies got. The social workers were amazed at how well he was developing, noting that he seemed to take the best from both of his mother's worlds. Rebecca's therapy sessions revealed deeper truths about her past. "I was always trying to be perfect," she admitted one day. "Perfect daughter, perfect wife, perfect mother-to-be. I was so scared of failing that I almost lost everything." Dr. Wong helped her understand that perfection wasn't the goal, being real was. The change in Rebecca didn't go unnoticed in her social circle. Some friends drifted away, uncomfortable with her new authenticity. But others, surprisingly, started opening up about their own struggles. At a charity lunch, another wealthy mother confessed her own battles with postpartum depression, thanking Rebecca for making it okay to talk about these things. James Hamilton watched his wife's transformation with a mixture of guilt and admiration. "I should have seen how much you were struggling," he told her one night. "I was so busy building our perfect life that I didn't notice you drowning in it." Their marriage, tested by the crisis, was slowly rebuilding on a foundation of honesty rather than appearances. Rita's life was changing too. Her adult children, initially skeptical about their mother's involvement in such a high-profile case, became proud supporters. Her daughter helped her prepare for court appearances, while her sons helped maintain a scrapbook of Daniel's early months. "Mom," her youngest said, "you're showing everyone that ordinary people can do extraordinary things." The most significant changes happened during the joint custody trial periods. Rebecca learned practical parenting skills from Rita: how to change a diaper quickly, how to soothe a crying baby without expensive gadgets, how to find joy in simple moments. In return, Rita gained access to resources she'd never had before, including the chance to take those child development courses she'd always dreamed about. One day, while they were both watching Daniel play in the park, Rebecca turned to Rita. "You know what's amazing?" she said. "I thought I was leaving him to give him a better life. I never imagined we'd all end up with better lives." Rita nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. The media, which had initially painted the story as a class conflict, began reporting on something more inspiring. A story about breaking down barriers, about mental health awareness, about redefining family. Local news channels featured interviews with both women, showcasing their unlikely friendship and shared commitment to Daniel's well-being. Rebecca's therapy group became a safe space where she could share her ongoing journey. "Sometimes the worst mistake of your life can lead to the best changes," she told the group. Other mothers, both wealthy and working class, nodded in understanding. The walls between their different worlds were beginning to crumble. The transformation extended to the Hamiltons' social circles. James started funding mental health initiatives for new mothers across all economic levels. Rebecca and Rita were invited to speak at conferences about their experience, sharing their story to help break down stigmas about postpartum depression and class barriers. As winter approached, both women prepared for Daniel's first Christmas. The Hamiltons' penthouse now had a mix of expensive decorations and homemade ornaments from Rita's family. In the corner stood 2 stockings for the baby, one designer, one handmade, symbolizing the beautiful blend their lives had become. Looking at Daniel playing with his toys, both women realized that sometimes life's biggest transformations come in the most unexpected packages. Their story wasn't just about a baby anymore, it was about breaking down walls, challenging assumptions, and finding strength in vulnerability. The courtroom was packed on decision day. 9 months had passed since a baby was found in a dumpster, and now Judge Patel was ready to announce her unprecedented ruling. The usual tension between opposing sides was missing, replaced by a strange sense of anticipation and hope. In the matter of custody of Daniel, Judge Patel began, adjusting her glasses. This court has witnessed something extraordinary. What began as a potential tragedy has evolved into an opportunity to redefine our understanding of family and community. Rebecca sat beside her husband James, gripping his hand. She looked over at Rita, who gave her a small, encouraging smile. Both women had come so far from their first confrontational court appearance. The judge continued, her voice clear and decisive. After careful consideration of all evidence, testimonies, and the remarkable progress shown by all parties involved, this court has decided to grant a joint custody arrangement. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This decision is not made lightly, but with full confidence that it serves the best interest of the child. The details of the arrangement were carefully laid out. Daniel would spend weekdays with Rita, benefiting from her proven nurturing skills and stable home environment. Weekends would be spent with the Hamiltons, who had demonstrated their commitment to change and their ability to provide additional opportunities for the child. Furthermore, Judge Patel added, both parties will have equal say in major decisions regarding Daniel's upbringing. This includes education, healthcare, and other significant life choices. She looked directly at both women. You've already shown that you can work together. Now you have the legal framework to continue doing so. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Instead of separate interviews, Rebecca and Rita stood together at the microphones. Today, Daniel didn't just get 2 homes, Rebecca said, her voice steady. He got an entire extended family who will love and support him. Rita spoke next, her words simple but powerful. Sometimes the right thing doesn't look like what we expect it to look like. But that doesn't make it any less right. The cameras captured both women hugging, a moment that would appear on front pages across the country. The next few weeks were busy with practical arrangements. The Hamiltons helped set up a better living space in Rita's apartment, being careful to respect her independence while ensuring Daniel had everything he needed. Rita's adult children pitched in, painting walls and assembling furniture, making it a true family effort. Rebecca and James converted their formal dining room into a warm, welcoming playroom. No more fancy vases, Rebecca laughed, as they filled the space with child-safe furniture and toys. Just room for love and mess and real life. The staff noticed how their employer's home felt more lived in now, more genuine. The first handover day was emotional but hopeful. Rita brought Daniel to the Hamiltons' penthouse on Friday evening. He just had his bottle, she explained, handing over his favorite blanket. And he loves this little song. Rebecca listened carefully, taking mental notes, grateful for Riva's experience. Their arrangement quickly became a steady routine. Both homes kept logs of Daniel's development, sharing every milestone and concern. When he caught his first cold, both mothers worked together, combining Rita's practical experience with the Hamiltons' access to the best medical care. The media's interest evolved from scandal to inspiration. Local news ran a feature about their unique family arrangement, focusing on how they'd broken down social barriers for the sake of a child. Other parents in similar situations began reaching out, seeking advice and support. One particularly touching moment came during Daniel's first birthday planning. Instead of the extravagant party the Hamiltons might have thrown in their old life, they worked with Rita to create a celebration that balanced both worlds. The penthouse filled with a mix of guests, society figures mingling with Rita's family and neighbors, all brought together by their love for one little boy. James Hamilton, watching his wife laugh with Rita over birthday cake preparations, reflected on how much had changed. He'd started a foundation focused on maternal mental health and family support across social classes, inspired by their experience. Sometimes the best business decisions aren't about business at all, he told his board members. The court-appointed social worker's final report noted something remarkable. Daniel shows secure attachment to both families, demonstrating that love and stability can come in unexpected forms. This case could set a precedent for how we view custody arrangements and family structures. Judge Patel kept a newspaper clipping about the case in her office. When asked about it, she would say, "Sometimes the law needs to catch up with the human heart." This case reminded us that justice isn't just about rules, it's about finding solutions that bring out the best in people. As the sun set on the day of the custody ruling, both families gathered in the park where they often took Daniel to play. Rebecca watched as Rita taught him to take his first wobbly steps, both of them ready to catch him if he fell. In that moment, she realized that sometimes the worst mistakes can lead to the most beautiful resolutions. "You know," Rita said, as Daniel toppled between them, "we could write a book about all this someday." Rebecca smiled, watching their families interact. Her husband discussing college funds with Reba's daughter, their sons playing catch nearby. "Maybe we already are," she replied. "We're just living it instead of writing it." 2 years had passed since that life-changing morning when Rita found a baby in a dumpster. Now, on a bright spring day, she walked up the familiar path to Daniel's preschool, where Rebecca was already waiting. They shared knowing smiles. Their weekly schedule swap had become as natural as breathing. He drew pictures for both houses today, the preschool teacher told them, handing over Daniel's artwork. One showed a modest apartment building with a garbage truck parked outside, the other a tall building reaching into the clouds. Both had stick figures with big smiles. "My family's," he'd written in wobbly letters. The transformation of their lives had rippled out far beyond their immediate circle. The Hamilton Foundation, now run jointly by James and Rita, who'd discovered a talent for organizing community programs, had opened 5 centers across the city. These spaces provided support for new mothers from all backgrounds, breaking down the barriers that had once seemed so insurmountable. "Remember how scared we all were at first?" Rebecca asked Rita as they walked through the park, Daniel running ahead to feed the ducks. "Now I can't imagine life any other way." Rita nodded, watching as her youngest son, home from college, caught up with Daniel to show him how to break the bread into smaller pieces. Their arrangement had sparked changes throughout the community. The local news did a follow-up story about their 2-home family, inspiring other families to find creative solutions to custody arrangements. The story reached far beyond their city, touching hearts across the country. Daniel's life was rich with experiences from both worlds. During the week, he helped Rita sort recycling into different bins, learning about environmental responsibility while spending quality time with her. He knew every driver on her old route, and they always humped and waved when they passed by. At the Hamiltons on weekends, he attended children's symphony concerts and art classes, his natural curiosity flourishing in both environments. The biggest surprise came when Rebecca and Rita started a podcast together. 2 mothers, 1 story became an unexpected hit, with listeners tuning in to hear their honest conversations about motherhood, mental health, and breaking down social barriers. Their different perspectives complemented each other perfectly. Rebecca's insights into privilege and pressure, Rita's practical wisdom and groundedness. Their families had truly merged. Holiday celebrations became joyful chaos, with Rita's grown children and their spouses mixing easily with the Hamiltons' social circle. Christmas was celebrated twice. First in Rita's cozy apartment with homemade decorations and traditional foods, then in the Hamiltons' penthouse with its spectacular view of the city lights. "You know what's funny?" James said during one such gathering, watching his wife help Rita's daughter with law school applications. "We used to think we were doing charity work by donating to causes. Now we understand that real change happens when you break down the walls between people." Daniel's 3rd birthday party was held at one of their foundation's community centers. Children from all walks of life played together while their parents chatted and shared stories. Rebecca, now a mental health advocate, had just finished writing a book about her journey. Rita had contributed several chapters, their different writing styles weaving together just like their lives had. The party highlighted how far they had all come. Rita's oldest son, now an environmental science teacher, was discussing green initiatives with James. Rebecca's former society friends mixed with Reba's neighbors, finding common ground in their stories of parenthood and community. The barriers that had once seemed so rigid had melted away. "Mummy Rita, Mummy Becca," Daniel called out, running between them with a paper crown on his head. Both women turned automatically, their hearts full at his joy. He had his own special names for them, created naturally as he grew to understand his unique family situation. Their story had even reached academic circles. Universities invited them to speak about modern family structures and social integration. Rebecca would share her journey from postpartum depression to healing, while Rita spoke about the strength found in community and the importance of looking beyond social class. The Foundation's latest project was particularly close to their hearts, a program helping mothers from different social backgrounds connect and support each other. "We call it the Bridge Program," Rita explained to a reporter, "because sometimes all people need is a way to reach each other." Life had fallen into a beautiful rhythm. Weekday mornings meant breakfast at Rita's, where Daniel helped feed the stray cats she cared for. Weekend afternoons were spent in the Hamiltons' rooftop garden, which they converted from a showpiece into a working vegetable patch, Rebecca's new passion. One evening, as they sat together watching Daniel play with both his families, Rebecca turned to Rita. "You know, that morning when I left him, I thought I was giving him up for a better life. I never dreamed we'd all get better lives." Rita squeezed her hand, understanding completely. Their story continued to inspire others. Local courts began using their case as a model for creative custody arrangements. Community centers across the city started programs bringing together people from different backgrounds. But most importantly, a little boy grew up surrounded by twice the love, twice the wisdom, and twice the family anyone could hope for. As the sun set on another day in their extraordinary journey, Daniel fell asleep between his two mothers, one hand holding each of theirs. In his dreams, there were no divisions, no barriers, no separate worlds, just one big, beautiful family that had found each other in the most unexpected way.